Kristen here from travelingcpachick.com, where we help you travel more without sacrificing the financial stability that you crave. So today we're going to be talking about my experiences with solo travel as a female, the good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly good. So stay tuned and I'll tell you all about the experiences I've had. So I had been really intrigued by the idea of solo travel before I even did my first international solo trip. And I decided to try it out by just doing a one-night trip to Newport, Rhode Island. So at the time I was living in Boston, it was only about an hour and a half drive. And I had just booked one night at a hotel and drove over there in the morning. And I started my day by exploring some of like the old historic mansions that they had. And after that, I didn't really have a firm agenda planned, so I just decided to drive over to where they have the cliff walk and do that walk. So there weren't many people around, and I kind of just felt really like exposed, and I was on the side of a cliff and it was really windy. And so anyway, I just started thinking not so happy thoughts, and I decided after that to just call my hotel and cancel the reservation and drive home. And that's what I did. And so even though I failed at my first solo travel experience, I actually learned a lot, because one of my takeaways was that I didn't really have an itinerary plan. I kind of just drove to Newport without a plan, which hindered me a bit because I was kind of playing it by ear instead of just having a plan to fall back on when I felt afraid or alone. So that was my first experience, and then many years elapsed, and Tom and I were finishing up our gap year of travel, and we ended our trip in Budapest in the country of Hungary. And we each needed to go to different places of the US after that. I had to go to Florida for a bachelorette party. He had to go to Texas. And so we were kind of out of funds at that point. We were trying to save as much money as possible. And so I found a cheap flight option where I would have to fly to Ireland for 4 days and then go from there to the east coast of the US. So I went ahead and jumped on it and booked it, and then the time got closer and I started getting a little bit panicky about the fact that I'd be in a foreign country by myself for 4 days. But I was also excited because Ireland was a country that I had been to before. I loved my experience there, and I knew there wasn't a language barrier, so I knew it would be a great intro back into the world of solo travel. So my approach for this trip was I booked and planned as much as possible beforehand. I filled my 4 days that I was there with a jam-packed itinerary, which was actually really nice because when I got there and the shock and kind of panic set in of being by myself, I had a plan to just fall back on and execute, and that worked really well. The other thing that worked well was I stayed in hostels while I was in Ireland, and I know that may seem overwhelming if you've not stayed in hostels, and it may actually seem unsafe, but it was a great option for me because as soon as I arrived and got to my destination, I went to my hostel and I was immediately able to meet other solo female travelers to hang out with during the time that I was there. And I didn't feel so alone. I knew that I kind of had friends and allies already in my location. So that was a ton of fun. I mean, it was really cool because as soon as I landed, kind of my fears went away and I just executed on the plan that I had put into place. The other thing that worked well was I did a few bus tours that were all day things. And normally I don't tend to do those because sometimes they're super touristy, but it was an awesome opportunity for me to be able to see some of the countryside of Ireland without having to rent a car by myself, which I didn't want to do because I didn't want to have to navigate the roads on my own. And so it worked out really well, and I was able to meet some other travelers that way too. So overall, an amazing experience, but instead of booking my next experience right after that, I let a few more years elapse. So I kind of had all of those fear and jitters all over again when I went to book my next trip, which was a solo trip to Spain. So the next solo trip was to Spain, and it was right before COVID, right before the world shut down in February of 2020. And it was definitely a more advanced version of solo travel because I was going to a brand new country that I had never been before. I was dealing with a language barrier, and I was going to bounce around a little bit more to some different places. But I did the same thing I did in Ireland, and I planned everything out in advance. I had a really well thought out itinerary, and I was very nervous, but as soon as I got there, my fears went away. One of the biggest things that Tom, my husband, kind of coached me to do was to kind of memorize and write down detailed instructions of my path from the airport to the hostel I was staying in. So when I was like dealing with public transit and walking directions, I wouldn't be so flustered and freaked out because I already knew the directions, and then I also had it written down. And I had planned out that path ahead of time. So once I got to the hostel, again, I was staying in a hostel and in an all-female room, so it was super comfortable. I met other solo female travelers and friends, and I went from there. And it ended up being a great time. I started in Madrid, Spain, and then I took a train about 2 hours to Cordoba, Spain, and did that for 2 nights. During that time, I wasn't in a dorm room at a hostel. I actually booked a private room at a hostel, which was nice to kind of break up some of the hostel time I was experiencing. So it was nice having my own space for those couple of nights. And then from Cordoba, Spain, I went to Sevilla, Spain, and that was about an hour more by train. And then after Sevilla, I went back to Madrid for 1 night before my flight out. So in total, I was in Spain for 10 days by myself. It was amazing. I met friends that I still keep up with on Facebook. And I actually had a friend there from back in my college days that I was able to reconnect with in Madrid. And it was just like a huge confidence boost. Everything went well. There was nothing weird or freaky or creepy that happened at all. And I will say that's a theme I've noticed with all my solo travels. It's pretty much just about conquering my own mindset more than actually having any bad experiences. Everyone is super friendly. When you're by yourself, you really open yourself up to more experiences, and people are naturally kind of gravitating to you because you just have this openness. It's not like you're with a group of travelers and you guys are all speaking English. You can really connect with locals more. In Spain, I kind of was able to frequent different tapas bars and coffee shops, and I met and kind of like the waiters knew me and I knew them, so I was able to form relationships in that way, and it was so fun. So highly recommend solo travel. Some other tips that I want to share with you guys are as far as safety is concerned, I typically don't let people know I'm by myself. If I'm meeting someone out at a restaurant and they approach me to talk to me, I normally tell them like, yeah, I'm visiting a friend in Madrid and staying with her. I'm going to meet up with her in a little bit for a drink or whatever. So don't just kind of let people know and flaunt the fact that you're by yourself. Of course, when you're at your hostel with other solo travelers, you can let them know. But yeah, when I'm out and about, I try to kind of always have a cover story. The other thing that I do when I'm at dinner by myself or a bar by myself is I tend to bring a journal. And so I either bring like a travel journal, or what I also like to do is I like to buy a bunch of postcards when I'm at a destination and journal on the back of those. So for my Spain trip, I had fun like every day buying like a new postcard depending on where I was or what I saw that day. And then at dinner, I would sit down and kind of just like do my journal on the back of the postcard. And when I came home, I put all of those in like a scrapbook. And so it's a really fun souvenir. But also it gives you a fallback plan when you are at dinner by yourself, and maybe it will seem a little bit awkward at first, so you can kind of immerse yourself in your writing. And I think it's a lot better than just kind of looking at your phone the whole time, because you're still staying open to the people and experiences around you. Whereas when you're just like in your phone, no one really talks to you or bothers you. So that is a really great tip for those lonely solo meals. But of course, they never turn out so lonely. People always approach you and talk to you or give you a smile. And so it ends up being a really nice time. And then the other tip that I have is to, again, schedule out as detailed of an itinerary as possible, but leave yourself flexible enough to be open to new experiences. If you meet other travelers, be open to like going and grabbing a meal with them, or whatever experiences come across your plate. So yeah, those are my solo travel adventures that I've had recently. The other one that wasn't truly a pure solo trip, but I did go to Prague for a little over a week a few months ago, and I met up with my brother because he was actually there. But while I was there, I was able to have some time to myself and did several days just kind of exploring the city by myself. So it brought back my solo travel bug. I think when you do start solo traveling, you're going to probably have a little bit of the fear and anxiety and jitters beforehand. But when you're there, you're going to absolutely love the experience. You're going to love being able to dictate exactly what you do based upon your interests and hobbies, and not just trying to please the other people that you're traveling with. So I encourage you to book your first solo trip if you haven't already. Start small, start with a weekend close to home, and go from there. I hope this helped you. Comment below if you've ever solo traveled or if you've been interested in doing so. And make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. It helps so much. Thank you in advance for all of your support.